Excuse me.
Let's take an offering tonight.
We call the meeting to order tonight, the Portland City Council of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. It's our second regular scheduled meeting of the month, or January of 2013. We're honored tonight to have with us Brother Randy Brown of the Portland Church of Christ, and ask everyone to stand at this time as he does a prayer and a pledge.
Our Father who art in heaven, we're so thankful for the many blessings that you bestow upon us each and every day. We're so grateful to live in such a great nation, a nation that allows us to have so much freedom. We're so thankful for those blessings. We're thankful for living in Middle Tennessee and the city of Portland. We're so thankful for the blessings that we have of being able to be here. This time we ask that you be with the leaders of this community. As they sit around and make decisions, we pray that you'll give them wisdom. You'll give them an understanding of the people so that they may decide those things that will be best for this community. Dear Father, we pray that we will support them in everything in which they do to enhance our community and help it to grow and prosper. Dear Father, we know that all these blessings come through your Son, and it's in his name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brother Brown. Appreciate you coming tonight and being part of that, doing it for us. Again, he's a minister at the Portland Church of Christ. Roll call, Doug.
Alderman Bratton.
Here.
Alderman Callis.
Here.
Alderman Coulter.
Here.
Alderman Harbin.
Here.
Vice Mayor McDowell.
Here.
Alderman Menace.
Here.
Alderman White.
All right, thank you, Doug. Next, we need the approval of agenda. Do you have a motion to get the agenda on the floor?
So moved.
Got a second?
Second.
We do have one add-on. I'd like to add it to the end of Public Works, and we just got that in today, the final change order adjusting quantities of the Community Development Block Grant. That's something we need to address tonight if we can. So I'd like to add that on to the end of Public Works. Also, at the end of Finance, after the audit presentation, Mr. Yeager will go over a little brief financial statement. And then also at the end of the council meeting, when it's over, we do need to have a brief executive session with Attorney Amonette, so let everyone know that this time. Does anyone else have any additions or deletions to the agenda? Not all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, we have a public hearing. At this time, this is a public hearing on one specific item. We will have a time of public recognition later on in the agenda, just very shortly after this. This is ordinance 12-55. It's an ordinance to amend the City of Portland, Tennessee zoning map by rezoning area of property at 1073 North Broadway from general commercial service district to multifamily dwelling. It's a property of Steve Somerville. Does anyone in the audience want to make a comment on this property rezoning at this time?
I'll address any problems that that's brought up if I need to.
All right. Mr. Somerville's here as the owner. I did have one citizen, Mr. Robert Freeman, who lives right below on this side of that property, called, said he could not be here, wanted me to relay to the board that he was against the rezoning of this project for two reasons. He has some water issues. He just felt like the water issue would, this would not help the water issue there. Then also he felt like the multifamily dwelling would degrade the value of properties in that area. So I told him I would pass that on at his request. Does anyone else need to make a comment on this rezoning? If not, public hearing is closed. Next, we have communication from Alderman and Mayor. Does any Alderman wish to have anything to state at this time to the public? I have one public service announcement I need to make. We do this part of our gas awareness. That just want to let the public know if you do have a gas leak, there are certain things that you should do. You call City Hall during the day hours if you have a problem or a gas leak. And at nighttime, you call the police station. They are able to get a hold of our gas personnel in the case of a gas leak. And gas is something that does not, it's a very good product, but it can be very dangerous. And if you have a smell of gas, be sure and call and let us come out and check it. And that's the City Hall during the daytime hours and the police station at nighttime hours. All right, does anyone else have any?
Mayor, I had a citizen relay to me their pleasant experience with an on-call person from our gas department that they called in the middle of the night because they smelled gas, and they just really bragged on how friendly and professional and I tried to get who's the name. They couldn't remember their name, but I just want to congratulate and appreciate those that do that job, because in that situation it was a very positive
Right.
experience with a member of the community.
Well, you know, it's and it puts people at ease too when you come out and check it and be sure there is not a leak. So. All right. Is anyone else?
I'd just like to say it. You know, gas, water, all of them have that same,
Right.
offer that same benefit. If you have a problem, all you have to do is call the police department.
And the only reason I did gas tonight once a year, we're supposed to do that because the Department of Transportation, that's part of the regulations that we're to do as a public service. But yes, anytime there is a situation with any city service or that we have, it's after hours, the police station has their own call list to call anybody in any department or knows how to get a hold of most all of us. All right, anyone else? Next, we have a period of public recognition. This is when anyone in the audience would like to address the council on any item on the agenda tonight, and we'd ask that you keep your comments to 5 minutes. Does anyone wish to address the council tonight? Anyone wish to address the council? Okay, if not, I have a special resolution I want to do. It's Resolution 1306. I'll get up and read this one. I ask the council, we go ahead and vote on it before I read it. It's Resolution 1306 in honor of past Alderman Melvin Briley. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the resolution. It's whereas the city of Portland grieves the loss of former Portland Alderman Melvin Briley. Whereas Melvin Briley was born to Willard and Gladys Briley in Portland, Tennessee in 1931, graduated from Sumner County High School in 1949, married Jean Jernigan in 1954, and continued to make Portland home, where together they raised 2 sons, Hal and Tab, and had 3 grandchildren at the time of his passing, October the 2nd, 2012. Whereas Melvin Briley served in the United States Air Force, served as local insurance and real estate businessman for 30 years, served as a deacon at Portland Church of Christ, where he was a member, served as the first president and charter member of the Portland Chamber of Commerce in 1962, served as past president of the Rotary and Lions Clubs, was a Mason for 50 years, served as representative to the Tennessee legislature from 1969 to 1972, and during that time was instrumental in helping to serve Volunteer State Community College for Sumner County. Whereas the city of Portland was fortunate to have Melvin Briley serve as an alderman from 1963 to 1969, and again from 1995 to 1999 for a total of 10 years. Now therefore be it resolved by the board and mayor of aldermen of the city of Portland that a tulip poplar tree shall be planted at Richland Park along with a plaque in memory of former Alderman Melvin Briley. His family is here tonight, and if they would come up, I'd like to present them this resolution. Resolution, I have Ms. Jean and I have with us. And like I say, this year we've lost several people serving this board, and Mr. Melvin was one of those very special people. Of course, I was fortunate to know him all my life, and Yeah, y'all got married the year I was born, so you know me. So, and he was a very kind, gentle person, very, southern gentleman, and he took the city of Portland very serious and wanted the best for his community. And I know finances was something that he was always interested in, would always relay. So we appreciate him. And we will get the plaque ordered, and it'll be your wife will give you the weather fits and that kind of good. I'd like to say.
I appreciate your honoring him tonight, the time he served the city council and also state representative. He was always thankful for all the friends that helped him get in those positions. I thank each one of you all too, very much.
Does anyone else like to say anything?
Me personally, I guess I probably, since I'm the old man, I guess now.
Yeah.
And I actually was a child when he and I served together, so several years ago. We lost two good men this year, him and that I served with this year is Bill Caldwell and Melvin. I served with both of them, and the community misses him immensely. And I miss Melvin tremendously. He provided great leadership to the young council members, and I was one of those people. And when he spoke, we listened, and because we respected him, and the community respected him. And I know he was proud of his two sons, and I know he feels good about everything that's going on now.
I appreciate that very much.
I had a lot of respect for Melvin. I've been knowing him a long time. I had a lot of respect for him. He was an honorable man. I miss him as a neighbor. Proud to have known Melvin.
Thank you very much.
I think we all knew Melvin, so.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Give them a moment, but this has been of course, that age, that generation that we all knew and grown up with and respected is slowly leaving us. And they're leaving a lot of good things and a lot of big footsteps for us to follow into. All right, next we have with us County Commissioner Billy Gamenden, Portland. And Billy would like to make a presentation to the council on the Portland preservation and primarily on the Temple Theater.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and all the aldermen for giving me an opportunity to show this presentation. And I've already shown it once today at the chamber luncheon, so if you were there, I hope it don't bore you. And I noticed y'all got a lot on the agenda, so I'll try to keep it a little less than an hour. I'll rush through it, but the Portland Preservation Foundation, only showing you this tonight because I want you to know what's going on and how we would like to help. And would anybody, I ask this question all the time, would you have any idea what's in the barrels? Anyway, strawberries. This was taken June the 6th, 1941. And actually these are three of my aunts that are sitting on those, but that's where somewhere along in there, or maybe before, that's why we have the Middle Tennessee Strawberry Festival. If you don't believe, a lot of strawberries were raised in Portland, and these were sent to soldiers in Europe. At least that's my understanding. But the Portland Preservation Foundation, see if I can see where that is. We started, we were a committee formed when the city acquired this house, the Moy Green House, and they applied for a TDOT grant. And the grant was going to be an 80-20 match. And the lady from GNRC that did the application and all, she said we need to form a committee that was a slice Portland or whatever, or several different people in the area. So we did. We've Jim Donahoe's on it as a nurseryman. Mayor Wilbur's on it from the city of Portland. Brian Harbin is on it, and then we've got Kathy Freeman. She's Portland High School, and
Stevie Broadway's on it, representative from the Historic Society. So we're not trying to take anything away from anybody. We're trying to help in the areas that we can help in. And the Chamber of Commerce, Jack Friegel is on it as their representative, and he's also our attorney. And I know a lot of people wonder about the Moy Greenhouse. We're not successful in getting that grant. And but one good thing about it, or several good things, the city does own the property, and it's not going anywhere, we hope. But the last of this month, I think it's the 30th of this month, at the Clover Bottom Mansion,
there's going to be a hearing.
And state historical people to put this, and we hope it's successful also, to put this house on the National Register of Historic Places. And if that is successful, it'll be the only place in Portland that is on the Historic Register. And that opens the door for different kinds of grants for that.
And we would still like to
See it as a visitor center. And that's just some floor plans of the house, you know, how we're hoping it would look, and still hope it does. And that's the outside.
Any of you seen part of this before, nice parking areas.
And this was also another thing, a greenway trail that was
Even a separate grant, and we hope that it's brought back up before too long.
It does connect the Moy Greenhouse all the way to Watt Hardison Elementary School, and the city has just turned in an application for a Safe Routes to School grant. Watt Hardison Elementary School, there's some kids that walk to school there, and there's not even one sidewalk around the school. And we're all thinking about child safety now and wanting to put officers in school, but sometimes we forget about them getting to school. We want to protect them, and that is if they get there. But in that, my wife done some, talked to the principal a lot, Denise did, when she was working on this grant, and they use, Watt Hardison Elementary students use the trail at Richland Park to get to the library, so it's all used a lot. And then this is another thing that the Portland Preservation Foundation is working on. It's something that we have sent in an application for, and I put on all of you's desks just a little bit about what the downtown program does. It's an 18 to 22 week, mostly educational thing that gives us ideas and instruction on how to revitalize your downtown, some things that can be done, and things that we would like to work on as possibly one day a week in the summertime, have a farmer's market, and many other things. And but we should hear from that anytime, and I think at the end of this instructional period and all, there is some grant money also attached to it. And then in the process, while we were waiting on to find out about the grant of the Moy Greenhouse, the Marsh Plate Glass property became available and up for sale, and so we decided as a committee to form a 501c3, a nonprofit organization, and call it the Portland Preservation Foundation. And we did our registration papers and also our 501c3, and we are totally nonprofit. And Mr. Morris, when he was had the business years ago, I used to do some business with him, bought a lot of mirrors and stuff, and he talked about several times that he would like to put the theater, because one side of his business used to be the old Temple Theater, and he would like to put that back. But that's something that we would like to see happen. It was started, I think, the best we can tell, in like 1937 or in the 30s, and it was exactly where Marsh Plate Glass building is now. There's two sides of that building, and one side was the theater, and you'll see the plans that we have for the other side of it. But it closed, I think, in the later years. Sometime in the 40s, it quit being the Temple and became the Strand Theater, and then in the early 50s is when it closed. And we get a lot of emails, a lot of people tell us stories about the theater and when they were growing up in Portland that they used to go to the theater. And one lady told us that it was named after Shirley Temple. And this is a picture of the inside of the theater, how it was at that time. And we found, actually Stevie Broadway found a lot of these brochures or flyers from the actual Temple Theater. They were in Cold Springs School, the movies that were shown there, and it was used then for a lot of music performances. We were told that Roy Acuff sang there one time, or maybe more than once, I don't know. But as you can see, it was billed the finest small town theater in the state. And this was in the later 30s. That's kind of what it looked like 2 or 3 months ago. Since then, some of that stuff has been torn out, but you can still, you have to look hard, but you can still see the theater there. There's some sound baffles still there, and of course you can still see the ductwork. The balcony is back behind. It's still there. There's just been a partition put up there. And then Denise and I visited several other small town theaters, and we went to Crossville, and this is one that I really would like to see us pattern after. This is the entrance way to it. Like I said, they had Marilyn Monroe, and we'll probably put Shirley Temple. But when they started, that's the inside of the theater, and this one is done. It's not real expensive. The blocks are concrete. I mean, it's just concrete block walls, and there's one also in Franklin, Tennessee that is, they spent a lot of money on it, but in Crossville, they didn't spend that much on it, but it is really, really nice. And when they started on this one, they told us there was trees growing out of it. So there's some more pictures of it. And also it is pretty much, it's very close to the same size that our building is. And then if you'll notice a couple slides on past this, I told you the Marsh Plate Glass building had two sides to it. One of them was the theater, and then it's 3,500 square feet, and then there's about that much, 3,500 square feet on the other side also. And the side that won't be the theater will be restrooms, concessions, but it still leaves a lot of room for tables and chairs for maybe some kind of educational venues or learning center part, that we can bill it as to possibly help us with grants or whatever on it. And this also is just shows some things that we can do. And for the industry that might be seeing this, Denise and I, her uncle was in the Red Bull in the Macon County Times. It says in November, I think it was something about a military thing that he was in, and we stopped and picked up a paper, and just happened to be looking through it, and you know, we thought Portland Preservation Foundation thought that was a good idea and our only idea, but then we find out that, or I did, I thought it was my idea. Then I find out that Franklin, Kentucky has an organization called the Renaissance something. Crossville has one, downtown Crossville, and even Red Boiling Springs has the same thing. They call theirs Vision 2020. But what I'm getting at with this, Red Boiling Springs has one industry, Nestle Waters, and you know they've donated $8,000 to Vision 2020, and we're just hoping that our industry will help us with this, but what we want to do is see downtown get back. We'd love to see it get back busy again, and we think if we can get there's things already started, you know, like the Strawberry Station and the Realty place, and Gary Kelly and them's fixed up their buildings. They look really nice. And if we can get people coming back downtown and interested in it again, I think it would be great and be a great help economically for our town. But this makes me think also, when I think of the industry, and I meant to mention it today at the chamber lunch and I forgot it, but the industry in Portland has added 1,000 jobs this past year. And you know, I think that's great and commend them for that. But here's both sides of the kind of a floor plan, and you can see the seats. I think there's 186 seats downstairs and 50-something seats in the balcony. And then the other side, you can see restrooms and concession area. And what we're doing to try to raise money, like again, totally nonprofit, and we're supposed to close on the property, and that's the Portland Preservation Foundation. The city has nothing to do with this, but we're supposed to close on the property, I think the 29th of January. And we have different amounts of sponsorships of seats. And you know, you would get a name plaque on the back of the seat, and you can, you know, maybe some people wants to buy a sponsorship of a seat in memory of somebody or whatever. But we have different levels on them. The ones in yellow in front were $1,000, then the purple goes back to $750, and then $500, the yellow ones in the back. And the balcony, we've had a lot of requests for them, and we put $1,000 on those also. And for a mere $50,000, anybody that would really like their name put up there, you can sponsor the stage. We were having a meeting one night, and Jack Friedel is our attorney, and I call him a kid, and he was fooling with his iPhone, and he sees on it where on eBay that there's a bunch of theater seats for sale, and the auction's going to end in 23 hours, and they're purple. So the next night, we bid on them twice, and we get them. 385 seats for $3,050. They look great. Well, there was one small problem. They were in Partyville, Wisconsin. And we had a local farmer, Johnny Crafton, offered to go get them, but he finds out it's going to be very difficult because farm license on a semi, you got to have all these other permits to go through Kentucky, Indiana, and Illinois and Wisconsin. So we, Jeff Mooneyhan, he calls us, actually on Facebook, his wife did a memo on Facebook that he would like to pick them up. So just as soon as his schedule allowed, the first thing that he had going to Chicago that he unloaded, he went over to Partyville, Wisconsin, picked the seats up, and I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, he backed in and we unloaded the seats. There's some of our volunteers that helped us unload, and Johnny Crafton brought a tractor and front end loader, and we had lots of help to unload them. And that's Jeff and Robin Collins. They're waiting for the show to start, and they're sitting in some of the seats out front there. And you know, this is a slide that we added this afternoon. Denise has got this on her for her wallpaper on her computer, and it was taken at the ice cream social at the Moy Greenhouse, and it's our grandchildren. But y'all were talking about Melvin Briley and the ones that had served on as alderman and served this town, and that's all any of us want to do, is leave something that we're proud of to our children and grandchildren. And I don't know, seems like you got to get to 50 years old or older before you care much about that, but then you do, and sometimes the people that you could ask about it have already gone. But then that's our contact information, and we just, there again, we're not trying to go out in front of anybody. We're trying to be a help, and we're just trying to make Portland a better place to live, a more fun place to be in, and more activity in the downtown area. And we're on Facebook. Our website is not much yet, but we're working on it. And that's it, and I thank y'all for what you do and for the service to this town.
When y'all started that and I've seen the information on it, I was really pleased. I thought it was a wonderful idea, and I think it's a great idea. Matter of fact, you know, I love to see the city be able to be a part and somehow help in the project, help the Preservation Foundation financially, because it is investing inside of us. And so I hope maybe that's something that we can do, and I look forward to seeing it. I think it's a wonderful idea, personally.
Actually, Chris Newton has helped us with it a little bit, but he just hasn't had a lot of time.
Call tomorrow, I might go. Okay. Got someone that does that.
I remember when it went from 15 to 17 cents admission.
Yeah, you're gonna tell us how old you are in a minute.
We love hearing
know,
stories
50 years
about it.
old.
We do.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, we, like, it's just, you know, and it's something that's gonna take some time, but it's, there's it's created a lot of interest, a lot of people, and I know, at one local business today already for 2 $500 seats, and so people are starting to step up and want to be part of it, so we are looking forward to that.
Oh, by the way, David said something like, don't look at $50,000
Stage.
Get away from him, because he's considering it.
Got his name.
Got his name on it.
Eminent stage.
Tell you what,
I'm gonna do it in honor of Lou Brighton.
Can we, we'll just start forwarding your monthly checks to them, and then we'll do it.
Till we get that paid right.
It shouldn't take about a month, should it?
About 50 years.
All right, again, thank you, Billy, for taking the time and all you do for come up here. Next, we'll get into the meeting. Vice Mayor McDowell, you've got one ordinance under planning.
One ordinance on planning tonight is ordinance 12-55, and this is the second reading. An ordinance to amend the City of Portland, Tennessee zoning map by rezoning an area of property at 1073 North Broadway from general commercial service district to multifamily, RM1. This is property of Steve Somerville. Properties at 1073 North Broadway, Civil District 16, Map 16, Parcel 4.02 and 3.0, and Map 1, Parcel 2.03. Move to approve, sit on the floor.
Second.
Have a motion, have a second for discussion. I think all of you should have been laid in front of you for tonight's meeting, not a final, but a tentative outline of what he wishes to do there with 9 duplexes and with its own street and so forth. Of course, it has not been through planning yet. It's not been through design review. Still got all those. All we're addressing is the rezoning tonight, but it was requested to kind of have an idea of what he was going to do, and that's what he's got here on paper tonight.
Is that a, can I ask Mr. Summerville a question?
Right.
Did you hear the concerns that Mr. Freeman had that Mr. Wilbur had addressed?
The water situation is,
Was he talking about a drainage issue or?
It's drainage, and it's a state issue, what it is. I put everything into, state rig or whatever. We got plans okayed by the state. We've installed all the culverts and whatnot to the elevations. And I'll guarantee those. But from my culvert down to the drain under 109, I ain't being somewhat dammed up by that ditch. And I have met with a state guy today. His name is Alan Hall, and I think he's going to get something done for him. He's a district manager of 5 counties. And I had a meeting with him today, and the water is not, my retention pond is just not operating properly because I don't have flow down that ditch, down 109. That's what it boils down to. And I just set my culvert out there right now, it's set with 8 inches of water in it right now. So, and then it rained and dropped since last Monday. It tells you right there that I'm not draining, I'm just not draining down. And,
Hopefully that'll address Mr. Freeman's issues that he had. We got to get that.
That was the one I can address, the water deal now. Anybody else got any questions?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
Look,
Evan.
that Steve talked to me about it, and I saw what he's talking about. It is a state problem. His water, all his drainage should go out and go down the state ditch across the road, but it can't because it's filled up, ditch is filled up. So I think he's done all he can do to alleviate the problem. The state, and I think the state will fix it, but I don't think they'll want to, do anything to hurt anybody else's property either.
Anybody else got any comments or questions?
Well, at the first meeting that we just talked about, and some concerns that I had was adequate landscaping, and I spoke to Mr. Somerville, and he said he understood that, and he's going to address those issues. And I do want to say, appreciate Mr. Bratton asking to have something drawn up, presented to us, I think, at that meeting, which is very helpful. And I like that when we have a zoning issue, that we can kind of see the idea that people are going, and so I appreciate that. And I understand what has changed between our original vision and then the road coming in at Lake Springs and the exit change. I understand how all that works, and seeing that this property could be suited for multifamily, so I don't have a problem with it.
I got one question. Are you gonna have any kind of buffer along the back property line, or?
Down 109, we will do probably somewhat of a fence or a line of trees, or maybe a combination to screen that away from 109, because, I just think it'd be the proper thing to do, because those buildings do back up to 109. So that is my intention to do that, for sure.
How far is that entrance from 31W?
That entrance that he's got drawn up there is approximately, I'm gonna say 500 feet or more from 31.
And the only thing is that if approved, and then actually design review would look at the aesthetics of it. So I think we're all concerned about interest coming into Portland, that whatever's put there, is something that we, that we all would be proud of. And I feel confident you would do that, but it's their job to ensure that you do that.
Yeah, I will have to go before them with what my intentions and, plans.
All right, any other comments or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you.
That's all I'm planning tonight.
Okay. Next, we go to finance. We have with us Karen Stevens with Parker & Parker, who has done our audit, and she is here tonight. So, Ms. Karen, I'll turn it over to you.
Again, my name is Karen Stevens. I'm a partner with Parker & Associates in Goulitsville, and I want to say thank you for letting me be with you tonight. These reports are hot off the press. I was here at 7:30 this morning for a meeting with Mayor Wilbur and Doug Yeagle to go over the draft report. You are seeing tonight a final draft product, and we'll talk about what things are missing from this report as we go through it. I would anticipate some responses from management over the next week, and this process will be finalized and submitted to the Comptroller's office no later than next week. So that will get it all wrapped up for June 30th of 2012. I'd like to just walk you through the financial statements. Please stop me at any point to ask a question, or if you think of a question after the fact, after this meeting, or when you receive the final product, you can contact me. The information is on the letterhead included in the report, or the mayor or city recorder both know how to get in touch with me multiple ways. So, all right, we'll go through this. It's rather lengthy. It's 60 pages. I promise I won't go through every page or read it to you, but I would like to point out some key statistics and things for the city. Beginning at the front, page 1, the schedule of city officials, the salaries and bonds. This is a new schedule that you're seeing for the first time this year, required by the Comptroller's office, and it does just list there the key positions of the city and who was in those positions during the period of time that we're auditing. Management elected to omit the salary information, which is an allowed presentation by the Comptroller's office, and there is proper presentation there of all of the coverage for crime and employee dishonesty policy. So, the next page following is the independent auditor's report. This is really what you pay us to do, which is give you an opinion on the financial information of the city. This report gets longer and longer every year. The federal government tells us some of this language, and our own standards tell us more of it, and that those standards continue to get longer. But buried in the third paragraph of this report is our opinion that says that these financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. This is the best opinion that we can give, and we're happy to give it. You all have earned it. Pages 10 and 11 of the report are what's known as the government-wide financial statements. These are on a full accrual presentation. This is not the same presentation that you govern with on a daily basis, not the same presentation that you budget on, but a presentation required strictly by the auditing standards. The intent behind these 2 pages is so that you could compare these financial statements to those of a for-profit entity. They're put together in a similar way, and so if you really just wanted to cut to the chase of it and market the city and sell it, what's it worth? And according to these financials at June 30th of 12, it's worth about $72 million. So if you can find the buyer for it, that's the net worth of the city right now. Page 12 really begins the basis of accounting that I think you're most interested in, and this is the modified accrual basis of accounting that you govern from on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And so beginning on page 12 is the presentation of the general fund and the other governmental funds. Presentation requires us to go through a calculation of what your major funds are, and major funds can change from year to year depending upon the level of activity of each fund. And this year you had 2 major funds, the general fund and the solid waste fund. I think a year ago, the major funds were the general fund and the airport fund. So it just really depends on the volume of financial activity within a fund. And so for the current year, you've got the general fund and the solid waste fund. At the end of June 30th, 2012, the general fund balance was $1.5 million, and that is a favorable number when compared to a year ago. We'll look at that on page 13. But one of the things I'd like to point out in the fund balance of the general fund, you all have done a very good job this year of managing to put almost $1 million into that unassigned fund balance. That is favorable in the sense that there is no restriction on that money from an outside party where you have committed those funds to some other restriction. So that is moving in the positive direction compared to 2011. Moving over to page 13, this shows the revenues and expenditures of the same funds, the general fund, solid waste, and the other funds for the year. And I'll just point out a couple things about this. The general fund had quite a bit of grant activity during the current year, and that's about the 5th or 6th line from the bottom there. $1.1 million received in grant funding in the general fund this year. And if you look up a few lines at the capital outlay, all of that plus some to the tune of $1.9 million was spent in capital expenditures. So quite a bit of grant activity during 2012. Also, the city did a good job, management and department heads, in holding the expenditures, and that is really where the positive increase in the fund balance comes from. The revenues were up slightly, but the expenditures were held to a very good number compared to 2011. And so all of that is moving in a very positive direction to ensure that you meet all future requirements that you might need in the general fund. The solid waste fund, year over year, June 30th, 2012, you see it's a negative number at the bottom there. Net change is a negative $70,000. Essentially what that means is that the general fund has been subsidizing that fund, and so for 2012 it subsidized $40,000 in cash in, but really because that's a net number there, the general fund had to cover an additional $70,000 of expenses of the solid waste fund. So it's my understanding from talking to management that that fund has not historically been designed to be a fund that could sustain itself, that the intent along has been that the user fees do not cover the expenditures, and you're seeing that here. So the other non-major funds, I won't go through in detail, but they are presented back on page, I think it starts on page 35. If you start with 35, 36, you'll see the detail of each of those funds for the year. Page 15, 16, and 17 are the financial statements of the utilities departments. This is the gas department and the water sewer department. At the end of 2012, the total assets of the gas, water, and sewer is $46 million. With $34 million of that being, of course, in capital assets. So the majority of the balance sheet is made up in the infrastructure that you all have put in place to provide those utility services. And I did bring last year's financials just so I could compare. That number is pretty flat with last year. It was right at $47 million last year. So not a whole lot of changes when looking at June 30th of 12 compared to June 30th of 11 on the balance sheet. On page 16, you'll see the results of operations of the utilities funds. The gas fund for the year did have a positive change in net assets of $426,000. These financial statements do reflect a change in your gas rate structure. You went to the pass-through adjustment, and that happened, I think, in January of 2012. The first billings for that went out. It was mid-month, either December or mid-month January, and I don't remember which. But so you're seeing about 6 months worth of activity on the new rate structure and then 6 months on the old rate structure. I also understand from our audit and from talking with the utilities is that it was a pretty mild winter that covers this set of financial statements versus the winter a year ago. And so you see that the revenues and expenses are down in the gas department in 2012 versus 2011, and I think most of that is driven by the fact that the the city just didn't use and therefore didn't need to purchase as much gas during 2012. I did ask this morning how the numbers are looking for 2013, and right now I think they're pretty close to 2012 at this point. In the water and sewer department, I would like to point out a couple things there. Income from operations was positive $907,000, and then after you pay interest expense, $472,000, and then after you transfer money to the general fund, you're down to another about $200,000. And then you see the fourth line for the bottom there says extraordinary item impairment of capital asset. This is the write-off of some construction in progress that has been on the books for a number of years. Some of it, I think, dating back 10, maybe 15 years. And the genesis of this was the initial lake project. I think if I say lake project, I think most people know what I'm talking about, where there was some engineering and some preliminary studies to look at putting a lake or making some improvements, increasing the size of a lake or possibly putting a new lake to serve the water needs of the city. When we began the audit a year ago, for the first time we worked with you all, we talked about this issue with management, and at that time, and this is disclosed later on in the financial statements, there was still some pending discussions with the state on whether or not permits might be reissued to make that project go ahead in the future. During this audit, we did receive the information through management that the state had declined that, and that project in its initial state and all of the engineering that had been incurred was not going to be able to be used on a future project. That the projects that are currently in place right now, the new chlorination projects and all of that, the engineering that we're talking about here, this $1.2 million, could not benefit those future projects. And so the decision was made, and I did consult with management on this and gave my opinion that I thought it was the right time and place to do this, to write all of those old costs off. And so you are seeing there the write-off of that $1.2 million. So that at the end of the day, the water and sewer department has a loss for the year of about $500,000, but you know, that's not a real cash dollar loss because that $1.2 million was spent over the last 15 years. So it's just a paper loss this year. But I did want to explain that. It's treated as an extraordinary item from the standpoint that we as the audit firm believe that it was something that was very unusual for the city. It was highly unlikely that it would happen in the future. It's just not something that you all routinely do, is write off this amount of money, saying that you're not going to be able to use those resources that you've paid for. And so we decided that the best disclosure there was what we call an extraordinary item. Any questions about that? Sure.
Money. This was part of our revolving state loan. Is that right for the, I mean, is that, how did that work originally?
Most of that was rural development.
Rural development, okay. And, you know, we paid these expenses, and I guess this number reflects money that was borrowed, interest over the years. I mean, I guess that's what this total number reflects, all of the money and engineering and everything that we've done out there for 15 years, I guess.
It would only reflect the expenditures that were coded to that particular lake project. So it would be engineering, it would be capitalized interest that you paid during that period of time. There was some preliminary attorney's fees and that type thing, and I'm looking to management here to...
The biggest bulk of this is engineering fees.
For that particular project.
For that project.
When I say biggest bulk, over $1 million of it's engineering fees.
And so when we do this, because I know it's been sitting there, so when we write this down, or whatever the term is, write off or whatever, we're done with carrying this any further in our sheets going.
That's right. So if you look back over to page 15 to your balance sheet and you see the capital assets there of the water and sewer fund, a year ago you saw a number in land, right-of-way, usage, and construction in progress of $2.8 million, and now you only see $779,000. So that number is gone forever off the balance sheet, and it's a one-time hit to your fund balance. Continuing on then, beginning page 18, I will point this out. The Comptroller's Office requires that you present your original and any amended budgets for all the major funds. And so we've got the budgets for the general fund and the solid waste fund here. And you'll see as we go a little bit further on, there was a compliance violation in the sense that the state code requires that the city cannot expend $1 if it has not budgeted to spend that $1. And there were some overages of some various departments for the year. So you'll see that when we get to a finding, but they are also listed here. And you'll see in that positive negative variance with final budget, departments that have negatives there did expend more than was budgeted for the year. Beginning on page 19 through 33 are the footnotes to the financial statements. A lot of information in here. Management has made some changes to some of the wording this year, adding a little bit more detail to what makes up the reporting entity. We make reference there to the Airport Authority and to the Industrial Development Board. A couple things I'd like to point out. On page, let me get to it, on page 24, top of page 25, the interfund balances and transfers. Of course, you had the issue of the transfers from the gas fund a couple years ago, and the resolution of that was to pay that back over a period of time, and that those payments are being made timely, and so that is continuing to reflect there, and those balances are declining. And I think the repayment of that was over 5 years, and you're in year 3 now of that repayment schedule. Yeah. Page 26, 27, a lot of information about each individual piece of debt there. Top of page 29, I'd like to point out some very good news for the year. A year ago, we did have a finding in the report about the city failing to meet some debt covenants on the water and sewer refunding bonds, and I'm very happy to state tonight, as it says in the financial statements, that you were not in violation of those bond covenants for the current year. So the changes that have been made to the financial process resulted in you not failing to meet those bond obligations for the current year. So that's very good news, and that's commendable. That really is a product of holding those expenditures again and positive revenues. So. On the top of page 31, page 30 and 31 talks about the pension plans of the city, and something that I said to the mayor this morning in our meeting, both on the top of page 31 and the top of page 32, as a result of the volatility of the economic markets over the past several years. If you look at the funding ratio on the top of page 31, this is how fully funded your plan is for benefits that the actuaries project you're going to need in the future for retirees. That number, since 2007, was at 92%. 2009, it was 93%. 2011, it was at 90%. What that means in real dollars is that you probably can expect that going forward, the required amount that TCRS is going to ask you to fund for pensions is going to go up. Because as that funding ratio comes down, because of the market, the investments are just not yielding what they once did, then the cities are having to make up for that through contributions. So I know you're getting ready to go into a budget process for your upcoming year, and I just would make that observation that you can probably expect that to go up. That's what I'm seeing right now. So same thing on the other post-employment benefits, the same trend. You can expect that is going to go up as well. Although you all are not currently funding any future liability, you're just paying for the retirees that are presently receiving benefits. So. Top of page 33. This is one of the reasons why these are in a draft form right now, and I didn't give management much opportunity to finish this in the last 6 hours or so. But I felt like that you probably needed some footnote disclosure about future capital projects. You did have a lot of capital projects ongoing at year end. that you've already signed contracts for, and so they're going to work to put that schedule together. We're going to add a little bit of footnote disclosure there for that. In the second paragraph under commitments, there is a disclosure about the fact that the city has recognized the donation of the library back to the city a year ago. You all had titled that over to the foundation because the reconstruction of the Memorial Library was in process. You now have recognized back an asset at not only what the city spent for it, but what the Sumner County, and also what the Library Foundation put into the project as well. So, note 12 there on the bottom of page 33. We've talked about it, but this is an explanation of the write-off of that that capital asset for the lake project. 35 through 38, as I mentioned, is just more detail about the smaller funds, the non-major funds. 39 and 40, this is a picture of all of your grant operations for the year under audit. The first page reflects all of the federal money, and then the second page reflects all of the state money. So your total federal money expended during the year we audited was $737,000, and then the state money was $1.2 million. So your total grant money that you expended last year was almost $2 million. And that's a sizable amount of grant activity for a city of your size, and to me that's always a very healthy financial sign. When that federal dollar number expenditures is more than $500,000, that's when you're put into what's termed a single audit position, where the audit firm has to do not only the regular audit, but a particular specific audit of these financial grants. And so you all were in excess of that, and you'll see the product of that at the back of this report. 41 and 42 are my two favorite pages of this report. For any city, I think this is one of the most useful pieces of information that's in here. This is a listing of every piece of debt that the city has. The first page are the governmental funds. The second page are the utility departments, detailed out with a repayment schedule of principal and interest until they mature or until they are paid off. So I find this to be a schedule that I go to pretty regularly when asked a question about the city. So hopefully you'll find those useful as well. 43 is a reflection of your property taxes, and I commented this morning that your property tax collections are also very good this year. The collection rate is very good. At June 30th, your 2011 taxes, there was only $152,000 to be yet to be paid. I'm sure at this point that number has come down to, I'm guessing, $60,000, $70,000 or less. Put him on the spot. I didn't ask him to look that up. And then the state requires us to reflect that new levy, the $3.2 million. That's actually tax bills that won't go out until October and won't be collected until February of 13, because technically the lien on the property happened January the 1st. So the comptroller's office likes to see those levies, even though the bills weren't sent out at the time of this audit. So, page 44 is your utility rate structure. This is also another item that we're still working to finalize, and that is a narrative on explaining the new rate structure with the pass-through adjustment. And I know I've been working with management on a concise way to explain that, and we'll get that in this week. 45 is a listing of your property tax rates over a 10-year period. 46 is, again, another schedule required by the comptroller's office. This is a schedule of unaccounted for water. It is supposed to reflect the discrepancy between water pumped through your system versus water sold or billed through your system. And that percentage of unaccounted for has been consistent. A year ago it was 33%, and for June 30th of 2012, it is 33%. So this is a number that the state does watch. Okay, that's all of the financial piece of the audit. Beginning on page 47 is where we get into really the meat of the single audit that I was talking about, where we audited the federal money. This is where we have to give our comments. This is always the popular section. 47 and 48 just explain how we do our governmental audit. 49 and 50 explain how we do our single audit. And they also incorporate the definitions that we're going to talk about here in a second, and that is material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, and other matters. 51, we're required to summarize the findings that were in this report a year ago and how those have been resolved or not resolved for the current year audit, and that's what you see on 51 and 52. What I really want to get to is page 53. These are the findings for the current year. There were two programs, two grants that we audited as major this year, and those are the Community Development Block Grants and the EPA grants, Clean Water, and there were quite a few projects that fell under those two grants. But we look in great detail at the paperwork related to those specific grants, even more detail than we look at for just some of the routine city expenditures. And what we found, and I'll just say this right off the bat, a year ago we had a significant number of findings in this report, very serious findings. Those findings are being repeated in the sense that a lot of them still existed at June 30th of 2012. But I'm very happy to report that since June 30th, and even as of now, many of those have already been addressed by management in a very positive way. And I feel like I have gone through some of the changes that have been made with management, and I cannot comment on it because we technically haven't audited those new changes yet. But I know you're moving in the right direction, and I would anticipate that some of these findings will go away in future audits. So that's a bit of news that I view as very positive for the city. So you'll, as you look at these, you'll see that even though the headers seem to be the same as last year, the tone of these comments is moving in the right direction, in my opinion. So we still see the issue of cash receipting, again, at June 30th and for the year we audited. The biggest issue is in that first sentence under the condition there. The City Finance Office underwent dramatic changes in personnel and procedures during the year we audited. Personnel changes resulted in daily duties and responsibilities being shifted multiple times during the year among staff until new processes were implemented subsequent to year end. So just a lot of ever-changing processes during the period we audited. Again, since year end, and management will have opportunity to respond to this on the top of page 54. But you can see in our recommendation that we're already recognizing the City Finance Office has remodeled the City Hall facility. They're in the process of redesigning and have already redesigned many of those internal control processes to address this issue. This is one of the ones that I would anticipate, in my opinion, will go away for 2013. So I think you all have taken some very good steps in that direction. 12-2 cash disbursements. Again, for the period we audited, a lot of the same issues were there that we talked about a year ago. Just a lack of segregation of duties on not really separating some of those key duties. I know management is working on separating those. Of course, 6 months of the fiscal year have passed, and many of those processes are just now being implemented. My hope would be that they're fully implemented before June 30th, but they may not be, and so this finding may again be there next year, but as maybe not necessarily a material weakness or not at the strength that it was at June 30th of 12. So again, you're moving in the right direction to fix those problems. Same comment with payroll. We had actually 2 findings last year about payroll, pretty substantial findings there. And again, as it indicates here, the city has moved in the right direction since June 30th in hiring a new human resources director. And I would encourage, and I know that he and the other members of management will work to make sure that the payroll process gets separated, the personnel files, the personnel manuals, all the things that we addressed last year as being very important to a city of this size with the number of employees that you all have. Those issues are very important, and I know the HR department is going to work on those and is already. I saw a draft of a new policies and procedures manual this morning, and I just smiled. I was very, very happy to see that. So I know y'all are moving in the right direction on that. 12-4, again, a comment from last year, the cash management system. In my opinion, I still think the city has too many cash accounts. And as I said in the meeting this morning to management, really no written or clear directive on investment strategies. You all have quite a bit of cash sitting in the bank. I know the interest rates have not been good for the past several years, but I think my comment to Doug this morning was that a little bit of interest is better than no interest. So one of the things that we talk about in here is really setting out to decide how, as a governing body, you want to make your investment strategies, to maybe set up some policies and procedures. Where should we put our investments? The comptroller does have some pretty tight regulations on what you can invest in, and I think those are appropriate, but you do have some options there. At what point do you move it from just a liquid checking account to an investment? Who makes those decisions? What triggers all of that? So just some things to think about from a cash management standpoint. Again, we did have a finding last year about purchasing, and I will say we made this presentation in December a year ago, so already 6 months of a fiscal year had passed before management was able to begin working on this issue. So the reason why we left it in is because of the number of exceptions that we had in our sample, and you can see there we pulled a sample of 60 expenditures that should have had purchase orders and followed the purchase process, and we found 30, so 50% of our selection that, in our opinion, had some problem with it. And the main problem, as you can see there, was that the purchase order was dated after the actual purchase. And so, it's really just a matter of filing the paperwork, but circumventing the control. And so we talked some about that this morning, about how the control is only good if it's in place and if it's being used. If it's not being used, then it's not an effective control at all. How does it happen? My opinion or speculation might be that I go and make a purchase of something for whatever reason, and then after the fact, I realize that I needed the PO, and so I go through the process of getting it approved and getting it signed. And I think appropriately, whomever dated them on the day they got them approved. It just so happened that the date was long after the purchase. So.
Someone realizes they needed a purchase order after they mistakenly made a purchase.
That's very true. This was not a statistical sample. The 50. Let me be clear about that. The 60. You all issue 10,000, 8,000 or so checks, or different expenditure lines, I should say, not checks, but different expenditure lines in a year. And we pull a very, very tiny sample of those, and it is not a statistical sample. It is purely a random sample. So we cannot extrapolate that to say 50% of all the city's expenditures would not have followed this process. I would not say that.
Right, it could have been 75.
It could have been 2.
That's right. But
So
I mean, it could go either way.
It could go either way.
It's not saying that it definitely was less than that. So how does that happen in the office? How does that work, that people can purchase things and then come get a purchase order?
And we're gonna work on it. We're department heads. The next meeting are and it's gonna have to be a department heads to take care of it. And a lot of times the things are approved and everything's okay, they just don't do the paperwork in the right order. I mean, I don't think anybody's getting anything that's not approvable or shouldn't be. It's just sometimes get lazy and get ahead of themselves before they do all the proper paperwork. So
another comment I would make about that is just, again, so many changes in the finance office, and so many people doing different jobs during that period of time when key positions were vacant. Whether that had anything to do with it or not, I don't know, because we had the same finding a year ago when you had a very static workforce. But again, we did see a similar pattern. Last year, our finding also addressed some other problems, and let me pull that out here. And I'm happy to say we did not find those issues again. The issues last year related to not acquiring quotes when required, not having proper authorization for travel expenditures, not having any paperwork at all in 8 instances last year, and we didn't find that this year. So every sample we pulled had some type of documentation that supported it. The travel reimbursements we pulled had appropriate documentation, and everything that we pulled that should have been either competitively bid or telephone bid was there. So
On this specific issue, the purchase order, was that, do you have that number from the last audit?
I do. We pulled a sample of 85 last year, and 27 of them had a purchase order dated after the invoice date.
And two, we need to, it's no reflection on anybody, sometimes they'll call and get a purchase order and get the number and everything, but she might not get around to actually printing the purchase order till 2 or 3 days later, even though we may already have the number, and I don't know if some of those maybe are getting caught in. So that's some things we've got to work on. Maybe, when she actually prints it a couple days later, they may be going on when actually the number was set aside for it a couple days earlier, and they knew about it, so.
Well, I just know we make the department heads jump through hoops when they want to purchase anything when it comes through here. And
All this
I don't
just
think it's
day
fairly
in,
fair to
day
them
out.
for it to be relaxed when it doesn't involve them specifically.
I just assumed that all our vendors required a PO number when it was purchased.
Yeah, most of them, like I said, some of it may just be an overlap time. We got to work on it, see exactly what's happening there. We'll get to the bottom of it.
Yeah, I think most of it is just specifically that, the timing, the processing of the paper on through versus the approvals that have been discussed and passed through or seen, but just not signed off, officially signed off on. Because I'm seeing that come through a lot of times, but we already know that it's either been discussed, it just hadn't been processed. We've turned into too much of a processing organization and not enough forward on it. So we've got to sort of get ahead of that issue so that the timing is a lot better. But it's more of a timing than anything else.
Auditors do get to live in that world of black and white. If the date says it's one thing, it's one thing. In reality, something very different might have happened, but all we can audit is the paperwork that's there. So.
And this oftentimes these minimum amounts, it could be
minimum amounts, but it could be maximum amounts too. Most of the large items are, like she said, anything had to be bid, any of your major contracts or anything are fine. Even though, if you look at some of the timings there, we may have, say, a billing from a contractor and that, but by the time it flows through the appropriate signatures and you get the official signature on it, it's already been, committed and billed that way, so.
Was this sampling of these 60, is this the $221,000?
Yes, the total of the sample. So when you look at the total amount of invoices, the sample totaled $221,000. I do have that number from a year ago too.
That pretty well knocks out that it's probably a little small expenditures.
Yeah, the sample from a year ago was $296,000. This would not be any capital purchases. So any major construction projects or, buying a police vehicle or something of that nature would not be part of the sample.
These are items that are under the $5,000 cap.
Not
Their average is
necessarily.
$3,500.
Not necessarily.
They're not necessarily under 5,000?
That's right. It could be any dollar amount. And I can provide, and I'm happy to, we have our exact sample of the invoices, and I'll provide that to management so that they can see the exact instances.
And I think that this is just, and I like, the first time, this is your second time doing our city. And, you made a statement once before, I'm thinking, I thought I got you confused.
Don't misquote me.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember, but, basically, with some of our lax things that we have here, that it would have been easy to rob the city blind, or so to speak. That's just a rough quote.
Because I knew where the weaknesses were. Sure. I think that's what I said.
Because that's what your focus is. That's what you look at. And thank goodness we have a lot of honest people that work here. First thing I do want to say that right after that last audit, this council kind of went right to the mayor and said, hey, can we do some things? He said, sure. And so he started working on that, and I really appreciate the mayor doing that. I don't know about anybody else, part of the blame, I think, was figuring out what we're going to do with the city recorder, what we're going to do, so that wouldn't field, and some other things HR wouldn't field, so I take a lot of the blame for some of the things personally that I think that just wasn't in place. But, you know, for something like this, I think it's real easy. It's just an easy thing. A memo could be sent out tomorrow, and it's pretty simple. If you buy it without a signature, you pay for it. And that would stop this process. I got a feeling pretty dead in the tracks, and you would never bring that up again, because I got a feeling if everybody knew that I ordered something that nobody gave me formal approval on, that's what you're looking for. Formal approval when you look at an audit. This guy signed off here, purchase was made after it was signed off and approved for. And so that's a simple thing and I'm sure they're going to address.
That's not what this is, though, I don't think. This is just when the purchase order was printed,
Well,
not
some
when
of
it
it
was
may
approved.
be that, it may be the approvals are in order, just the dates are not lining up. So that, we'll get into it, we're gonna get into it and get this.
It's my
Not all,
understanding.
we concentrated more on the quote system and a lot of those things.
And y'all done an excellent job, and I mean, you
on
really
that,
did. I think.
But we'll get a handle on this. This won't be in there next year. If it is, and I'll cut my throat.
And you also have to remember, a lot of these are not officially approved until they go either through me and the mayor, so the timing is where we've really got the issue.
Sure.
You know, the department heads a lot of times are approving before purchase, obviously, but not getting through all our process.
I think in my opinion, one of the fixes for this issue, the purchasing, really has to do with the process of cash disbursements, because cash disbursements really begins with the purchasing process. And I had several discussions with Doug about revamping the way that whole process works day to day within the city, to try to tighten up and strengthen, put the right controls in place, and then tighten and strengthen those controls and make sure that everybody knows the controls and that they're being followed consistently and routinely. And so I know that that's something that's been on his mind because we have discussed it. So.
Well, I just know after the first time your company did our audit, y'all really gave us some great advice that we hadn't really had, I don't think, you know, or it hasn't been brought to light it was as serious as it could have been. And I do, like I say, maybe I should do more patting on the back than I do, but I do appreciate the mayor getting right on some of those things. And he did a good job, and I'm sure they'll do that on this, but we appreciate you bringing it to us.
I have a question about it. Is this the way that we handle our purchase orders? Is that the most effective way, in your opinion? Is it the same way that other cities handle their purchase orders?
I don't think it's the most effective way. And that's a lot of the conversation that Doug and I have had. He's asked my opinion on different things, and I've offered it without him asking several times on changes that you can make, a lot of changes in who does what first, second, third, to make it a more efficient and effective process. The whole premise behind the purchasing procedure, and it's outlined in your charter originally, but I think all of it in your charter. It's very detailed, and then you've got some follow-up ordinances to that. The whole point of it goes back to, and what we're just about to hit here, which is the budget violations, that the city cannot expend $1 more than it budgets to spend. And so the process of purchasing is to ensure that you meet that state requirement, along with a whole lot of other state requirements about competitive bidding and those types of things. So I believe a lot of this is tied together in just getting those processes that have already begun finalized, getting them implemented. I think you will see some changes in a very positive direction, just like you already have begun to see with cash receipting. I think when you get the disbursement and the purchasing, that hopefully next year that fixes also the budget violations that we'll talk about next.
Just to give you an idea of something once, Karen, how many checks did we send you to pay your initial bill?
It was either 3 or 4.
I think it was 5.
Was it 5? Okay. I lost count.
Which means we're issuing that many multiples for one invoice, basically, to get it to all the funds. And that's the crux of a lot of this. We become so paper-oriented, so we're filling filing cabinets and chopping down trees to do purchase orders and get all these, 5 different sets of invoice, purchase orders and everything copied to issue 5 checks from all the either different funds or whatever. And that's really the crux of why a lot of these timing issues are there too, because you got, I mean, a mountain of paper that every one of us got to review through, and it's very inefficient. And so we're looking at central dispersing if possible, and meeting the requirements for the comptroller's office. Some cities do that already, so we've already got some discussions going with MTAS and trying to find specific cities that are doing it so that we can go out, look at the pluses and minuses and see how we get there. But obviously, I mean, you think about it, if we can go from issuing 5 or 6 checks and 5 or 6 POs and to one set all the way through, what that does to our efficiency.
Currently, do all POs come through you or the mayor?
Come through me.
Come through you?
I sign them off.
Would it not be more effective to allow the department heads to issue the purchase orders, since currently they really have no tie to the purchase order? They just get to purchase without a purchase order and a physical purchase order, so which relieves them of any liability.
Well, I think we've got an issue in our procedures that require it to come through if it's over $1,000.
I understand, but that's not, since that's obviously not being implemented, and there's purchases without having a purchase order in place, would it not be more effective for the department heads to have the ability to issue a purchase order without getting approval?
I think then you run the risk of too many things being spread out so far that you don't, in cases of competitive bidding and all that. You need it focused and controlled by an individual, i.e. in this case Patsy, looking at all the issues. Now, what I said is we made her into more of a paper pusher than a person that's got time to go out there and look at and say we're meeting our requirements. We can look at additional areas for, you know, buying more effectively and things like that. And that's where we really got to focus this thing, is how do we become more efficient by eliminating the redundancy. We got so much redundancy, it kills us. And I mean, you know, I'm sure Karen will be glad to elaborate what she's seen, but I mean, that was the frustration on our first conversation. So
I don't know if you still have this practice or not, but there was a time when businesses in town were issued a monthly PO number, and any employee could go to that business and make a purchase and charge it to that PO number. And I'm assuming they'd only get billed once a month.
Mm-hmm.
So
we have certain accounts that we do that with now. Ace
You still do that now?
O'Reilly's and that. If you want to look at the invoice package, it's about that thick.
Yeah.
Because you got $4, $5, $10 invoices that total up to a $1,600 statement at the end of the month.
Mm.
So, yes, that is for making it easy to get the small items that we need. But like I said, the redundancy in the middle of the larger is really where your efficiency can be gained.
And I can understand that process, because the guy at the parks department or whatever, I need a whatever. I can run up here and take care of this and get this, or do I have to wait 3 weeks? And
Right.
so, you know, there's understanding of how those day-to-day activities need to run, but, you know, and I'm sure as the advice is given from the auditor to us, we will tighten whatever.
Well,
we
you
need to
have
do.
you have to be practical about it. You know, it makes no sense at all for small items to expect that you could issue a PO every time they need to run and get, you know, a box of nails or whatever. So you do have to be practical about it. And there are already exceptions written into there's an ordinance from the 80s that has some exceptions listed on it for routine expenditures like rent payments or something of that nature. So that's already been carved out of the process quite a while ago. Yeah, my advice to Doug has been to do what meets all of the requirements of the state and the city charter, but also is practical and can be implemented and met, you know, on a day-to-day basis. You don't want to put something in place that can't be met. So. Okay. The last finding that we have there, the budget violation, I just mentioned it, but here it's listed each of the funds, or each of the departments, I should say, that were over budget for the year. The city did not do a budget amendment, so the original budget was the final budget. And there were 4 here, highways, streets, and roadways, not including the state street aid, parks and recreation, city garage, and the airport fund. All did expend more than budgeted for the year.
I had a question, because I don't remember ever seeing anything like this show up in an audit before. Is it because we were without a city
requirement.
recorder and,
You didn't have
new
any
requirement.
budget violations last year because a year ago, the comptroller's office changed the requirements for your budgeting process. Historically, city budgets, and this is the statewide, municipal budgets could be budgeted at the fund level. So the general fund could have a number that it could expend. Solid waste could have a number. A year ago, the comptroller's office changed that. Now you are held to a departmental budget. So it's quite possible that you did not have budget violations in the past because you were looking at it at a much higher level.
well, that doesn't address what I was about to ask, because even on the department level, a budget amendment would address that, I would think. Is it just we haven't caught up to where we do the budget amendments at the department level, or what's causing that to kick out?
We didn't do any budget amendments.
That's kind of what I thought, because I didn't remember doing them this year.
That's why, because you haven't had any violations, because it was basically one department was covering another one if you had an issue. And here now, look at city garage. I mean, you're talking about very little amounts being expended, but it's over $3,400. Well, that would have been absorbed when it's, put in with all the other ones. But now that it sticks out there, the new requirement, and if you remember.
So we have to start doing budget amendments department by department, not just on the overall
We
budget.
have to look at the totals that way, yes.
Those departmental budgets, according to the comptroller's office, those departmental budgets include all grant projects and capital purchases. They have to be allocated by department. So while you are going through your budget process, you may put together a capital projects budget for the city as a whole. Ultimately, that capital projects budget has to be broken down by department, and that's how the comptroller's office and therefore our audit or any other auditor's report would reflect a department by department. The only thing that's carved out of that is debt service.
So here's the crux of what I'm getting to.
Mm-hmm.
Because the phrase I have heard definitely top 5 since I've become an alderman, whenever something comes up and you have to spend something a little more than what's in the line, we'll take care of that with a budget amendment. Can that be, because what you're telling me now, it sounds like that has added consequences and difficulty now as opposed to how it used to be.
Going forward, I'm gonna say yes. I spoke with the comptroller's office about this issue because, again, when we first got into it, we asked the question, okay, if you remember your budget ordinance that went up, it did not have this kind of detail in it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when Karen and I were talking about it, we said, okay, I don't know exactly what's required, so we talked to the state, and they started telling us, okay, these new requirements are there. Okay, well, we hadn't put this thing together that way, and most cities had not.
That's right.
So they were inundated with this issue. So I think if you want to call it a grace period, there's probably going to be a little bit of grace period. But what we want to do as we go forward, and you'll see it in your next budget ordinance that comes to you, it's going to be very much more detailed by department to show all this so that we've got it. But we have to monitor and manage to it a lot better. And then we need to, if we're going to have to do budget amendments, we do them within the year, not 6 months after or 7, 8 months after. As one of the individuals up there told me at the comptroller's office, yes, you can do that. I don't know if it accomplishes anything, but I would still go ahead and do it for now. But I think in the future, it's going to be, if you haven't appropriated the money by the end of the year, appropriately have it in there, then you are going to be in violation. Don't know what kind of consequences it's going to mean at this point, but these will have I would say next year and year after have a whole lot more of a stigma to them than they will this year.
So there has to be a lot more scrutiny on any line item, whether you've got it elsewhere in the budget or room elsewhere in the budget, another line.
You can have
There's going to be a lot of
line
increased
now
scrutiny,
up and down that department.
line by line.
But yeah, when you
Not
start looking
crossing.
at the different departments.
Well, it's been the state's really cracked down on a lot of that stuff. I mean, we used to take gas money and use it wherever we wanted to. We can't do that anymore. And the days of saying, well, the parks, we need $3,000, but we're out of well, just take it out of the mayor's budget or what. We can't do that anymore. I mean, they're getting down to every fund. They want to know that every fund is self-supporting, as we determined it would be at the beginning of the year by the end of the year, I guess, based on money coming in, money going out.
Let me just clarify a few of the comments, just to bring them back to the state law. The self-supporting or the funding, the idea that revenues have to equal expenditures, that is still at a fund level. but you are required to budget your expenditures at a department level. So, so long as, you know, if one fund revenues if one department's revenues offset another department, that's okay, because you're going to look at the revenues in total compared to the expenditures by department, and those two numbers must equal one another. So it's not the intent that, for example, the revenues of the police department have to support the police department, because they never will. It's just that the revenues of the general fund, for example, must support the total of all of the departments of the general fund. Does that clarify that?
The one
just a little
statement
bit?
that you made, and I think we'll burn this in our heads, is you cannot spend $1 without it being appropriated. Don't matter where the revenues come from, you cannot spend $1. Now, think about this year's budget. There is no projects budgeted in this year, 2013. Okay? Obviously, we're going to have a amendment to the budget to get all that in there, and before year end, we have to. Okay? But that's the crux of this. It is nothing can be spent without it being appropriated. And when you start looking at it and say you have the emergency, well, okay, we're going to spend less over here, we can do that. We have to do a budget amendment ultimately for that.
So as
and we don't want to wait until after the audit to do it.
So as we do the spending, we have to amend the budget.
Technically, before you do this.
Well, that's what I mean. Before you can approve the expenditure, you have to approve the amendment to the budget.
That's right. And let me just clarify one thing, and I have not even said this to Doug yet, but a point of clarification there. The code section, and I can give you the code section reference, but if you are doing amendments, let's use that word, between departments of a fund. So let's say that the fire department needs additional money and the police department is not going to use that money, and so you want to transfer it from police to fire. That's a very common incident that might happen, or vice versa. Those types of transfers can be done at a lower level than a budget ordinance. And if you look at the code section, it says by resolution or ordinance as appropriate according to your charter. And I'm going to have to look to the attorney because I didn't look at it, so I don't know what the right answer is there. It may be that those transfers between departments within a single fund could be done through a single reading ordinance. I doubt it's a resolution, but I leave the legal advice
All ordinances have 2 readings.
to.
So if it's an ordinance, it has to be.
So regardless of whether it's budget ordinance or regular ordinance, it would still be 2 readings, so.
Where were we over 279,000 in highway street? What
Road,
is
I'd
that?
imagine.
Let's see.
Because I know initially there were no road projects and we paved some roads.
Yes, some paving.
So
Mhm.
It was paving, I imagine.
We were looking at it
Detail
earlier,
right
it
here.
was several different things, I think. Oh, it includes, part of it, the big chunk of it, I think the streets department was like 53 overall. But when you have to put the projects into it, we had overexpended on what we had budgeted for the projects, i.e. like we're doing now. We got 0 budgeted and we're spending money on projects. We had that same issue. We may have budgeted 200,000 and spent 379 within this budget year. And that's what's causing a lot of that. I'd have to go back to the specific ones. I didn't bring it in here, but I knew there was one big project that was overexpended on streets.
And I
Just
did not
versus
bring the
budget.
detail either, I
Just for
apologize.
public education.
Right.
So I don't get as many calls as I know I'm going to get. You know, the whole thing you're talking about with projects, so what's been done is you pass a budget and then you watch it, and if 6 months you're on track not to spend a certain amount that's in a different line, you allocate that to a project. It's not like we just don't pass a project's budget and then go willy-nilly as we go. So
Yeah,
please
well, also, too,
explain how that works.
You got to remember on timing. All right, so we have a grant for $500,000, and we're going to spend $500,000, but it's not going to happen until next year. And yet, the timing works out that we get and can draw on that grant this year and start the project. Okay, remember the revenue side, we don't worry about except in overall. On the appropriation side, that spending, and a good example was the library, because one of our issues in the general fund was the library. We had $182,000 of spending that we had no appropriation for that particular project because of timing. So a lot of this is just timing. It's not we're way overspending or something like that. That's not the issue. It's more of a timing issue of when the project starts, or when it ends, it could carry into the next year, that kind of thing. So a lot of it is that issue. It's not that the revenues are not there either via financing, grant, or additional revenues over and above budget that were received.
To clarify what I was saying, for the people that look at that or see that, we didn't spend $280,000 more than we said we were going to spend, right? I mean, we did on paper, but the money.
We did on your budget that you created a year and a half ago or a year ago or whatever. We did spend more than we put in that budget. We came through probably on resolution in that to be able to do additional things, but we did not go in and do a budget amendment to put it into that old budget.
Revenues covered it, but we didn't appropriate it in a budget amendment.
Revenues and/or fund balance.
Right.
So a combination of either current year revenues or previous accumulated revenues and fund balance would cover.
So yes, we did spend $280,000 more than we budgeted.
Well, the reason I said that, we'll have somebody on the front row next council meeting saying the city spent $280,000 they weren't supposed to spend. You know how that goes, and trying to justify.
Technically, they're correct.
That's correct.
Because somebody will ask that. Technically, what we didn't do is we didn't go back and do the amendment to cover with the revenues and the spending. And here you gotta remember, we're focusing only on the spending side. So we could have got $500,000 and spent $300,000 of it in this particular budget year. But because when we were budgeting back here, we didn't realize we were gonna be able to start that project then, we didn't put it in there. Doesn't mean we don't wanna do that project. So what we needed to have done is a budget amendment. Because they lumped it all together, you might have budgeted 10 projects, let's say, and 5 additional projects that you didn't budget took place, and 3 of the ones that you budgeted didn't take place. But based on dollars, they still may show that everything was okay.
Is it like our State Street Aid Fund, where we didn't technically say we were gonna do Portland Boulevard in last year's budget, but when we realized we had the money in the fund, we went on and did the project now? We didn't quote-unquote budget for that project, but we waited to see when we had the money. When we had the money, we started paving with it, but we didn't actually budget for it.
Saying that we spent $280,000 that we weren't supposed to spend is probably misleading. We spent $280,000 that we didn't budget to spend, but it turned out we had and we needed to spend. And obviously we did have it because all of our balances went up.
Right.
Right.
Revenues and stuff, it may have been, say like Lake Springs Road, may have been all budgeted for, say, 14, but yeah, we got started the other month earlier, and we had a payment that came in.
So
Just using that example, may not have been one.
this is significantly going to increase the amount of budget amendments we deal with on a yearly basis.
I
Practice.
would say yes, and you're not the only municipality that's going to be
I think it would
dealing
be
with that.
everyone,
Right.
every municipality.
So it is,
I'm the only one.
in my opinion, it's a change in perception of budget amendments, that the budget is now not just a tool that's set at a certain point in time and is good for, 12, 18 months, but is, a ever-changing and evolving document. And I would anticipate not only for you all, but other municipalities, that there will be multiple budget amendments during a year, perhaps.
We used to do a catch-all at the end of the year, so you can't do that anymore.
You'll probably
You would
still
look and
have a
see what-
catch-all for any little issues at the end, but major things like, and I think I made that statement one time early on when we were talking about, the thing I remember, Mike, was the finance in that one loan where we had the debt service a lot higher than was necessary because of the combined two. That we needed to amend it in the budget so that we can move the monies to where they were needed.
You may be.
And so, just like when we paid off the solid waste to gas, that really is a budget amendment that we're gonna have to do. Because it's money spent. It was also money passed, and we had the money. That's not the question. It's just where we spend it. We didn't say we were gonna spend it there. We said we were gonna spend it over here.
Should the amendment be made before the expenditure made?
Yes.
It should be, yes.
Yes.
That's what the requirement is.
But 30 out of 60 probably won't be.
I have only one question. Do you fully understand what we need to do to keep us in compliance? Okay, I'm okay.
Thank you. But I will say this to you, it's ever evolving with the comptroller's office, and that's why I use the word grace period a little bit, because they didn't, even though they said this is what you're supposed to do, probably 90% of the budgets that they got, they approved as they were years before. So they're going through the same issue of how to manage all this too. But yes, we understand how to keep in compliance.
I don't want to lay awake at night and worry about it, you're gonna handle that.
You're fine.
Okay.
You can sleep.
Okay.
I will just conclude by saying a couple of things. One, thank you for the opportunity to be your auditors. I'm happy. I feel like that the report hopefully is moving in a positive direction compared to a year ago. We have at least one more year on our contract with you all, and we hope that we'll have more opportunity after that. So I say thank you for that. And then finally, it was a pleasure to get to know and work with your new city recorder. He's a fellow CPA, so of course I'm biased. I think that he's doing a very good job, and I think he has a good vision, in my opinion, for the finances of the city and where to go to move it forward and continue that positive direction. So.
Just like to make one comment. Last year I was somewhat critical of the audit and maybe the presentation, and in retrospect, maybe I owe your firm and your apology, because it appears that the previous auditors maybe didn't bring out some things that they should have brought out. Because, you know, we, as I stated last year, we paid a firm, as long as I've been on the city council, we paid a firm to provide this audit. And I was surprised, you know, of the findings you made, given that we went through a couple of firms. So, and in 2 years, and with Doug's agreeing with you and agreeing with what the state has said, I appreciate your effort.
Well, you just paid me the highest compliment. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then, too, lags between recorders and so forth, that Tricia and me decided to take the CMFO classes, and I'm studying the section right now in internal controls and audits. You know, we always look at auditing firms supposed to be the finance part. Really, all they're supposed to do is double check the finance is supposed to be done here. The internal controls and be sure we follow policies and all that, and the classes we have from the control, that's their primary job, not the finances, is being sure we're following policy, got internal controls and things like that. So it's up to us to be sure the finances are in order. So. And so I think that's what we saw, the difference. We have one that's dealing more on finances, one more dealing what the comptroller recommends.
Well, when the statement was made that you're lucky you have honest people, was disturbing to me. You know, so
I was a little harsh with you last year.
But that was disturbing. I mean, you know, and we do have honest people, but we had someone watching the ship prior to that, and that was my concern. And maybe it's been resolved.
Or did you say we were going to go over that some other time?
One of the pending items in the report, and the reason why it's not final, is a narrative on the new gas rate structure. And I apologize, I don't remember what page that's on. But that management was working on a very condensed explanation of that new gas rate structure to put into your utility rate disclosure, and that is on page 44.
Where it's like it's highlighted, but it's copied. So. Right, exactly how it's figured.
Did you have a specific question
I'd
about
just
the
like
gas
to see
rates?
how it compares to our previous gas rates. Sponsor.
And that was the final comment that I wanted to make as far as the timing. Doug and I both had in our conversations this morning the idea that we would be having this conversation in early December of 2013 for the year ended June 30th of 2013. I think that's very possible from our perspective, and I hope he feels that way as well. The timing of it this year, Doug worked very slowly on purpose so that he could get a very full understanding of all of the finances. So as we worked through this audit, he used that as opportunity to really dive into each general ledger account, and I appreciate that he did that. It did slow down the process just a little bit, but at the end of the day, I think you have a better financial picture. So.
I understand why it may have taken a little bit longer this year, but in the future, it's just really not conducive to intelligent conversation if we get the draft 30 seconds before we're supposed to start talking about it.
Certainly, absolutely. We'll try to do that next year, where that you've got the draft a week or so at least in advance, and you can prep for that. And I will just say, I wouldn't anticipate any of the numbers would change in the final product, but when you do get that and have opportunity to look through it, certainly feel free to contact me with any questions.
All right, has anybody else got any questions for Ms. Stevens?
I just appreciate your help for us and pointing out some things. Like I say, I'm glad to see that it's more favorable than it was and that we're making progress. So I like that, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you a lot, appreciate it. Next, Doug, you'd handed out a little detail. Why don't we let Doug go with that, and let's take about a 5-minute break. I don't mind, we've been here a couple hours, and then, because we're gonna be here a while longer.
Yeah, each of you
But
should
let
have.
him go with this, and we'll do our break.
Yeah, each of you should have this one page. It's just a quick snapshot of the funds by department and everything, so we can sort of look at spending through December. A lot of things have been year-to-date been fixed as of December 31st, so this is a pretty good snapshot of items. One thing I will say, and I didn't put it in the bottom, but you also got to remember looking at timings on this, and I gave Mike a for instance on it. When you look at your expenses and we start looking at them by line item in there, some of the timings on payroll, and i.e. the benefits associated with them, year to year, can distort it a little bit. In other words, December 12th, you'll find that there was 7 insurance payments in the numbers, not 6, because it hit December 30th, I guess, was the last one. For some reason, the one for December of 2011 only had 5 in it. So when you look at that line, you would say, wow, we're running way ahead on insurance. But truly, we're not. When I do it, I annualize it based on the number of payments to look at the budget. So keep that in mind when you look at all these numbers. Of course, you wanted to look at the percentages of each of the spendings and revenues against where they are on budget at this point, so you can see. And if you have specific questions as you go through this, want more detail, just call. Be glad to provide it for you to look at. Obviously, if you look down at gas, where it still has been rather mild, although you can't tell it by tonight, we're running only at about 25% of our overall revenues and expenditures on the gas department at this point. Of course, if this weather keeps up, that'll come up rather quickly. Just scanning at it, I didn't want to take very much time. Do you have any specific questions, departments, or whatever you want to look at?
Looks like all of them are right at where they need to be, or even under. I mean, so they look like they're doing pretty good.
I gave the mayor this about a week ago, I think, and I went through it pretty in-depth year-to-date through 12, just to see where we were, to get a good picture of it, and I felt pretty good about where the numbers were. So
The only one that sticks out is sewer collection. Is that way behind for a reason? It's on fourth land at 60%.
I think, let me see, what did I do with my detail? Here we go. Tell you what, if you want to, is there any other ones besides that? Any other questions? Because I thought you can break them, and Brian and I can show him what's in there if you want to.
Any other questions for Doug? Let's take a 5-minute break.
Are we gonna get out of here by